Hey, everybody. Welcome in. I'm going to give it a couple minutes or so for folks to join. But while we wait, drop in the chat where you're calling in from. I say this every time, but if you've been to any of my previous webinars, you know I'm based in New York City. And we've got a couple special guests here from across the world a little bit. So I'm curious to see where everyone else is tuning in from, and we'll get started in just a minute. Seeing Nepal, Georgia, USA, Paris, North Macedonia. One of our great teammates is actually from there as well. Lagos, California. Yeah, so an audience from all around the world. This is great. All right, so I think we can go ahead and get started. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm Brian. I'm a developer relations engineer here at KiloCode, and today brings something that I've been really looking forward to because we've got some special guests. So if you've been following what's happening in KiloCode over the past couple of weeks, you know that we had this whole thing with Spectre, a stealth model, and then we eventually revealed that Spectre was actually Devstral 2 from Mistral AI. And the response has been really exciting to watch, honestly. A lot of people have been building with it, testing it out, sharing what they've found. But today, instead of me just telling you about the model, we actually have the team who built it here to talk about it directly, right? Which is way more interesting than just hearing me ramble for another 45 minutes, right? Which if you attended the Spectre webinar, we had a lot of fun showing a demo of what we built and talking about it. But this is a chance to kind of get a little bit of an inside look. So this is going to be more of a conversation between myself and the Mistral team, more so than a presentation. I've got some questions for them. We're going to dig into what went into building Devstral 2, why it's optimized the way it is, and what it all means like in the greater landscape of this world of agentic engineering that we're all living in now. But before that, I want to do a quick recap of the past 2 weeks. So for anyone who maybe missed that or is just joining us for the first time, let me catch you up. So about 2 weeks ago, we announced that Kilo users had exclusive early access to a new stealth model. We said at the time that it came from one of the top 10 AI labs in the world, and we just called it Spectre. We couldn't say who made it. We just said, hey, it's free. There's no usage caps right now. Go try it. And you all kind of went crazy with it, honestly. We hit 100 million tokens used collectively in less than an hour, which is crazy. And then a billion before the end of that first day. People were building games, debugging complex apps, doing migrations, all kinds of stuff, posting on Twitter. And we were loving seeing everyone building with it. And the feedback was really positive, right? People kept saying things like, this model is really good at following instructions. It's fast and it handles complex tasks well. And then last week, we finally got to reveal what Spectre actually is. So Spectre is Devstral 2, a next generation agentic coding model from Mistral AI, who, if you don't already know, is a pioneering French artificial intelligence startup with the mission of making frontier AI accessible to everybody. So we're in this phase now where, the mystery is over. People know what the model is, and they've had a couple weeks to really put it through its paces. And today we get to talk to the people who actually built it, which I think is going to be really fun and valuable. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Pini and Baptiste to join the stage so we can get started. Pini, if you both would maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do at Mistral and the stuff you're working on there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start. I'm Baptiste. I lead the co-generation team on the science side at Mistral. So I was basically the team mostly responsible for building the actual models. And yeah, I've been at Mistral for about a year and a half. I was at Meta before that, working on Llama and Code Llama, for instance.
Awesome.
That's great. I'm Pini, and I work with Baptiste teams on the models themselves and also with other teams on other things we do around code and customizing the models, working on different product surfaces and with our customers. Super happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much to both of you for joining and for that introduction. I got a big list of questions to ask you about Mistral and Devstral too. So let's just hop right into it. The first one is, Devstral 2 is a true coding agent. What makes, or a coding model, excuse me, what makes training a coding model fundamentally different from training a general purpose LLM? And where do the hard problems actually live in that process?
Yeah, so I will say that there are a lot of things that are very similar.
Mhm.
Typically today, we treat code mostly like sequences of tokens, just like for other modalities in text. But there are some trade-offs that you can make. For instance, when you want to train a code model, you may want to train on more code tokens, which makes sense. And for code agents in particular, there are some things that you want to do where you need some specific data and some specific training methods. Like typically for Devstral, we wanted to have a lot of data with executable environments and unit tests that allows us to actually run the solution that is generated by the model to see if it is correct or not.
Right.
So at the post-training stage, it's something that's very important. And for other models, we also need to do things a bit differently. For instance, for completion model, which is named Codestral, we need to do things for infilling and next edit, which also requires different methods at training time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for those who don't know, Kilo's autocomplete is actually powered by Mistral's Codestral 2508. And we've been seeing some great results with that, and the community is very satisfied after having us turned it on by default for everybody a couple weeks ago. So thanks for that answer. The next question is more about the architecture and design decisions behind Devstral 2. So Devstral 2, excuse me, Devstral 2 is a dense 123B model. What made you go dense instead of mixture of experts like some of your other models? What are the trade-offs developers should understand? And if you can maybe even help us understand what are the differences between a dense and mixture of experts model?
Yeah, that's a very good question as well. So the main reason why we wanted to train dense models there instead of mixture of expert models is that we wanted to have models that are really usable for the community, since we open source all these models. And I would say that for most players, so for the smaller players, for individuals or small companies typically, it is much easier to serve a dense model, because otherwise the total amount of memory that you need to serve the model becomes quite a big constraint.
Right.
So typically with a 123B model, you need a lot less GPU to serve it efficiently than if we were to release a model of the size of the large model that we have released a bit earlier. For the 24B model, it's true as well. Like here, especially if you use a quantized version, you can run it on a consumer grade GPU, like a single one, or even on a MacBook. While if you had a much larger MOE with maybe 100 billion total parameters and less active parameters, it would be more difficult to serve, even though maybe you will be able to have better performance if you serve it in the right setup.
Right.
Yeah. I think maybe a point to make here is also the way we want to engage with some of our customers. So this gives us the ability essentially on like 4 H100s potentially, right? To
Right.
serve the model to pretty large constituency of users. And for a bunch of companies out there who significantly either care about their privacy or want to go through like a customization process with us, this is an architecture that actually enables that in a much more sane way, I want to say. And really helps us kind of like deliver value to a bunch of customers that otherwise wouldn't be able to be kind of like powering their development workflows.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, and kind of leading into another design decision. So the model has 256,000 token context window, which is significant. Can you walk us through how the model actually performs when you're pushing towards that limit? Like, is there a difference in when you're at 50K tokens versus 200K tokens in that context window?
Yeah, so basically we have some evaluation results that show that the model is still able to understand long context up to the 256K context window. But then I will say that in general, as you have longer and longer context, especially if you are serving a model that is quantized maybe, or if the setup is not exactly the same as what we have in prod, the errors can accumulate and the performance can degrade a bit. Also, as you are generating more and more tokens, you have more and more opportunities of going astray, and it is true for any model, including our
Right.
own. So, of course, if you generate something that is longer, you have more chances to have done something that's bad and got the model to a place that is a bit too out of domain at some point.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So another thing that I noticed when I was testing the model, and I know some of our community members also raised as well, is that the model is really good at following like specific instructions, and that when you really outline what you want, it follows those instructions well. So was there anything maybe in the training data that you think made this model so good at following instructions? And then maybe on top of that, if you could share your top 3 prompting do's and don'ts for interacting with this model.
Yeah, so don't know if you want to start, or otherwise I can start. As well.
You can start.
Yeah, so for what we did in the to make the model especially good at following instructions, so we also added a lot of the general instruction following data that we have at Mistral, that was created by our team for part of it, for the part about coding, but mostly by other teams for the general instruction following. And I think that's something that helps a lot. And also we have some very specific data for code agents with, as I was saying before, some environments to check that the result is correct. So it really allows us to generate trajectories and give some feedback to the model based on what was correct or incorrect. And I think that for this model in particular, that's something that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it also speaks then to kind of like some things about like how do you activate it or prompt it. So I'd say like, I don't know if I can compile it into like a list of 3, right? But like I would say the one thing that we have seen like in the last 3 years since using AI for coding became more and more ubiquitous is that you want to be clear with the model, almost in the same way that you would want to give an instruction to like a fellow peer in that sense.
Right.
So when we hand over a task to a team member, right, we usually say more than 5 words, and we usually outline kind of like, this is what I want to achieve, this is what good looks like, right?
Yeah.
When we end it. So I'd say it extends to most coding models or tasks that people engage with.
Right.
But I think it's also true for Devstral in that sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And that kind of leads me to another follow-up question about, prompting and using the model. How do you think about the tension between making a model that follows instructions precisely versus one that pushes back a little bit when the user's approach is suboptimal, right? Because like the first iterations of AI that we all saw was a bit of a yes man, like it just agreed with whatever you said, and it didn't necessarily push back when it should. So how do you kind of see that tension in the design?
Yeah, I think these are not mutually exclusive
Okay.
to some extent, right?
Yeah.
There's 2 things here. So the ability to kind of like follow instructions doesn't have to be on the expense of the ability of the model to either surface trade-offs, ask questions, right? Try to clarify the situation. Some of it can be on the model, and some of it also can live on the harness or the scaffold side, right? So there can be like the optionality to introduce into the agentic loop steps like clarification. So have the model grade kind of like the input that provided by the user through some type of mechanism that will check that it is actually clear and everything there is like checks out, and the model can ask questions. Models can be introduced in the either on their own kind of like base trajectories or on the scaffold side, and with mechanisms such as surfacing 2 options, right? For each one. So I think it can maintain these qualities while still excelling at instruction following once the direction has been chosen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I definitely agree. So then, the SWE bench scores and all of these benchmark scores are great for headlines and marketing. And it's important when a new model comes out so that we can get kind of a feel for, where it stands in potentially our workflow. But that is different in some ways than actually using it in your development workflow. So in your opinion, what types of real world coding tasks is Devstral 2 actually best at? And maybe where does it still struggle in some ways, if at all?
Yes, I think it's a very good remark. I mean, I believe that SweBench is a good benchmark, but of course, it doesn't tell the entire story. It's very focused on basically solving issues from GitHub on repositories that are already there.
Right.
So it doesn't take into account all the things about starting from scratch,
Right.
which are use cases on which Devstral is also good, and a lot of people also use Devstral for that. We found that a lot of people also use it for explaining their code base to them before doing some changes themselves, or better prompting the model to do the changes afterwards. Or just to know how to use it, which command to run. And I mean, there are quite a few other use cases that people have. But yeah, we definitely don't focus only on SweBench when developing. We also have a lot of developers at Mistral who are using this model every day and giving feedback.
Right.
Some of it automated and some of it is just on the feedback channels. And often it's something that we consider to be more important than the scores on SweBench.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So definitely we've seen people use it for a host of use cases in that sense. And the SweBench results are almost an aftermath of creating a model that you find the most efficient. I think one thing maybe to highlight here, like a scoop, we actually had a checkpoint that scored better on SweBench. So we actually have a model here that we have not released to the general public that has a higher score than the one that we released on SweBench. And we decided not to release it because we tested it both internally and externally, and we just came to the conclusion based on other metrics that this model is actually less good to be applied into real world tasks. So when you apply it to a certain benchmark, it performed better, but when you actually, like a day in the life of a developer, it was slightly less efficient, slightly less pleasant than the one that we released. So maybe that's the ultimate illustration to the fact that that result is not telling everything, and B, that we actually did not intentionally optimize for it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, honestly, and super refreshing to hear, because I think like everyone's first glance when a new model drops are these benchmark scores or like the highlights of the announcements. But like you said, like using it in your day-to-day development workflow is the real litmus test and where you get like the really valuable insights. So it's refreshing to hear that you took that into account and at the scale that you did, even opting to not release a model that performed better on SweetBench. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and I will say it was a really higher score. So I guess the message here, when you'll see higher scores from us, you'll know that you can trust them.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. All right, so you mentioned that Devstral 2 has architecture level awareness. What does that actually mean in practice? And can you give me maybe a concrete example of something that Devstral handles really well that maybe other models might miss?
Yeah, I think that in general, it's so I don't have a particular example right now.
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
you've seen one, but I will say that in general, we see that with the larger version of Devstral and compared to other models, it seems to be better at following instructions in some cases, and also better at generating tool calls, that actually makes sense for given the prompt of the user, and also at avoiding tool call errors.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And then I guess the next, moving on to kind of a different topic. So there's also Devstral Small. So how should developers think about when to use Devstral 2 versus Devstral small? Is it just a cost and quality trade-off, or are there maybe specific task types where small actually performs better? And can you maybe tell us a little bit about the difference between the two?
Yeah, so I mean, the difference on our side is mostly about the size, but also I guess you noticed that Devstral small also can also take images in. So it's also a bit of a more experimental version and a newer version than Devstral medium. So basically, it has this extra capability if you want a model that can also use images as input. While Devstral small has this capability that the 123B version doesn't. I mean, otherwise, I believe that the 123B Devstral 2 is generally better at most tasks. For some of them, the ones that are on the easier side, you're not going to really see the difference. But for more difficult tasks or tasks where the instruction following is not as straightforward, you may see a difference in some cases. So yeah, I think it's mostly a cost versus performance trade-off. In the cost, you can also have the ease of serving it.
Right.
Now, if you want to run it locally on a MacBook, Devstral 2 is not really going to do it unless you have a huge amount of RAM,
Right.
while the 24B is pretty easy to serve.
Yeah, makes sense. And you mentioned that that Devstral small supports those image inputs and Devstral 2 doesn't. Is there anything about adding the vision capabilities that's technically challenging, or should we expect vision in any future versions, or can you maybe spread a little more insight onto that?
Stay tuned. We'll say, stay tuned.
All right,
Updates
cool.
are coming.
Short and sweet. I like it. um, so yeah, I'm gonna jump around to maybe a different topic, which is kind of more high level about the overall landscape of agentic engineering. So I'd be curious to ask what your take is on the current agent scaffolding landscape. Should more of that intelligence live in the model itself, or is the tooling layer where the innovation needs to happen next, or is it kind of a trade-off?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that like as a trend, we've seen that it used to be the case that you needed to create like extremely robust scaffolds just to get models to follow like very simple loops, right?
Right.
And more time goes on, like new generations of models, especially you can see it with Devstral 2 and other peer models. A lot of the trajectories that we used to hold in the scaffold is already baked into the actual model weights, right? Like explore the
Right.
code base, create a solution, validate your solution. These are all things that are almost native to the model, irrespective of the scaffold. So I expect this trend to continue. However, that's an important point. I think the scaffold need to innovate a lot, and they play two important roles, right? So the more the models advance, scaffolds advance. We have today harnesses like Kilo, for example.
Yep.
It can do or enable people to do amazing stuff, right? And to expose some of these capabilities into the hands of people. I think that's number one. Number two, the fact that the model has like a general purpose nature to them does not mean the scaffold needs to be general purpose. There is like a bunch of place, in my opinion, for very opinionated design, in the sense of like, what is it that this tool is here to help you achieve as a person?
Right.
What's the shortest way into getting this value? And in that case, I think that the opportunities to still innovate and to have a lot of alpha are almost limitless. And if that makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
I think both sides of the equation has like a role to play, and I expect that would continue.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that makes a lot of sense. Um, so the next question would be, on your side, now that developers were able to use it not just for that stealth week or period in Kilo, but that it's out in the public, what feedback are you hoping to get the most from developers using these models, and what kind of feedback would maybe influence your roadmap the most?
Yeah, I think mostly. No, what are you using the model for? What do you like in this model, and what do you want to see in the next version of the model?
Yeah, so I mean, hey, if anyone's in the chat and wants to answer some of those questions, I'm sure that would be some valuable insight. But
yeah, for sure. So like anything also that it's like fun and unexpected in the sense of like use cases or things that it applies can influence the roadmap, of course. And just sometimes just basic wondering in the sense of what do people want more? Do they want it to be like extremely fast, or do they want it to be extremely smart? What's the trade-offs that people are willing to make that we can also bake into the architecture? These are always interesting, and like in the fullness of time, I guess over time the model is out there for a week. So I guess like in time we can collect more and more and more into it.
Yeah, for sure. And then maybe the final one, because I know we're coming up here on time. This is more of a figurative question, but if you could wave a wand and change one thing about how developers interact with coding models today, what would it be?
Yeah, I think that in some cases I can see people giving extremely short prompts to the model that are very ambiguous and wouldn't be clear for a human either. And I think that some people have a lot more success using this kind of agentic models by treating them like a more junior engineer, and basically kind of giving some indications or talking to them about what kind of design should be chosen to solve a task. I think especially if you have pretty specific thing that you have in mind for your task, or if you want to have something that will be very well integrated in your code base and very easy to maintain afterwards. It's something that can really help and can make a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm already seeing some feedback in the chat here saying people think it's fast. I see someone said I very much appreciate how fast it is. And that kind of reflects the feedback we saw during the stealth period as well. So I'm not sure if you saw, but when I hosted the Spectre webinar, I built like in one shot a 2D platformer game called Kilo Man, which was like a little like Super Mario thing. It was able to do it in one shot, and I gave it like a pretty detailed prompt, but came up with something really fun and interesting. And I know that a lot of other people during that stealth period where we challenged people to test it and build something unique and cool, built a lot of cool things. Like one person built, they lived in Australia, and the local government had some kind of public data on the amount of Bluetooth devices passing through intersections. I'm not sure how they track that, but they basically had this public API, and this person built a mobile app that will send them a push notification when their local streets were really busy, so they knew not to go out on the road. And that was built with Devstral too, which I thought was like a super interesting use case.
Nice.
But yeah,
that's amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, of course. And we retweeted a bunch of those things that people built. I saw someone else built like a motion simulator, like a 3D graphical thing where you can type in an emotion, it'll give you like a aesthetic output. So yeah, I think people had a lot of fun with it. People are still using it, and I'm super grateful for both of you joining today and giving us a little bit more insight into what went behind the model and how to use it in the most optimal way. So thanks a bunch, Pini and Baptiste, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I want to say that we really appreciate this kind of feedback, and we're also sharing this kind of use cases from people that people post on Twitter within the team. And it really feels nice for us and for all the other people in the team who worked on making Devstral and DCLI a thing. So yeah, all these things are very much appreciated.
For sure. We really appreciate this. Really invite you all to engage with us. Look us up in socials. Happy to also meet people afterwards, and looking forward to be back on this stage with next releases.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to do that. I'm going to send a follow-up email with the recording and with all the contact information and visibility and socials that you all need to keep in touch with us. But yeah, this was great. I really appreciate the time, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm going to throw up the Reddit and Discord QRs. So we have our Discord community with over 10,000 users now. We'd love to hear your feedback there, as well as our Reddit thread. And then, like I said, in the follow-up, we'll provide a little more information about how to stay tuned with what Mistral is doing. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pina and Baptiste. And we'll talk soon.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good Wednesday, everybody. See you at the next one.